All right, so today we had trial again in the Kransky case. The date today is February 19th, 2013. And there was some interesting testimony today. Today was one of the last days that the plaintiff has been putting on his case. The plaintiff himself testified in the morning and explained what life was like with his hip and the difficulties he had knowing that he was going to have a revision surgery. As you may recall, Mr. Kransky, the plaintiff in the case, was very ill at the time and was terrified that he wasn't going to make it out of the surgery. He also testified about how his health really improved after the revision surgery as far as fatigue and other things. And he attributes that to the fact that the hip was removed. The other thing we heard about after Mr. Kransky testified was there was the testimony from an individual at DePuy named Paul Arnott. Mr. Arnott was the individual who was in charge of making sure that complaints and problems with the ASR hip were reported to the FDA. What he testified to was very interesting. What he said was that there were a lot of complaints that ended up not being reported to the FDA. And he was shown some emails where apparently there was some understanding within DePuy that if a doctor had to revise an ASR hip, for some reason that revision would not be considered the type of adverse event that would be reported to the FDA. And it wouldn't be reported to DePuy either for their own internal trend analysis. Mr. Arnott admitted in his deposition, which was presented to the jury, that revision surgery should have been reported and they should have been tracked by DePuy, but that they weren't. And so that was a very, at least a very interesting development. It was something that was not brought out in the plaintiff's opening statement, but it appeared that the jury got it and understood it. The other thing that we had on February 19th was the testimony of Peter Formuzis. And Formuzis is an economist who's been doing very, very well-respected economist. And he was asked to give testimony and opinions with respect to the net worth of DePuy and their profits. And the reason for this is in order for a jury to award punitive damages, they are required to understand and have some evidence about the net worth of the defendant. And the reasoning behind that is the purpose of punitive damages are to punish a defendant, to discourage them from doing something similar in the future. And in order to adequately punish them, you have to know how much money it would take to really make a difference. So Dr. Formuzis testified that DePuy had $3 billion in assets. That was their net worth as of 2011. He also testified that over the past 10 years, from 2001 through 2011, the company made about $11 billion in profit. Their annual sales were about $5.8 billion a year. One thing Dr. Formuzis did that was very illustrative of what those numbers meant and to help the jurors understand what they meant was he prepared this graph that I thought was very effective. And it was a graph that had 3,800 small, tiny squares on a piece of paper. And what he testified was that $3.8 billion, which is the net worth of DePuy, is basically a situation where each one of those squares equals $1 million. And when you saw all of the squares up on the screen, it was very effective at explaining what that number really means. It's a huge, huge number. He was also asked to basically shade out squares to represent 1% of the company's net worth. And he did it with 1%, 5%, and 10%. And what you see is when you do that, it's actually a very small portion of the big number. So today I think was another a pretty good day for the plaintiffs. They did a very good job at showing that DePuy had problems with their complaint reporting, explaining that this was a very big company with lots of money, and that it would take lots of money to adequately punish them. And overall, I think it was good.